And will you pray with me? May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. In thinking about Father's Day, I came up with a few different ideas, and then I thought, maybe we'll tell a campfire story. That seems like a Father's Day kind of thing. So, our campfire story this morning does come from the Bible. It's an oldie but a goodie. It's the David and Goliath story. And so there's going to be a campfire story. There's going to be a little bit of baseball. It's going to be a Father's Day themed sermon. And Father's Day can be a little bit tricky, as we just talked about in our prayer time. You know, for not everyone, Father's Day is not a, why can't I say that? Father's Day is not a joyful day for everyone. Some people have lost their fathers, and some people have strained relationships with their fathers, and some people have not known their fathers. But we also have fathers of the faith, and we have God our Father, and we have nurturing, fathering people in our lives, whoever we are. People who have taught us important lessons, like the importance of living bravely. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So, the story of David and Goliath, just to remind you, this takes place in the reign of King Saul. And King Saul was the first king of the Israelite people. And you remember last week we heard a little bit about the prophet Samuel, who became a prophet at a very young age, and he was an important messenger between the people and God. And the people said, Samuel, we really would like a king. And Samuel went to God and said, they want a king. And God said, I don't think that's a good idea. And Samuel came to the people and said, God doesn't think that having a king is a very good idea. And they said, no, we really want a king. So God said, well, we'll give them King Saul. And once they had a king, well, they had warfare. And Saul's main goal as the king of the Israelite people was to conquer territory and establish a nation. Maybe that's why God thought it was not a great idea. But Saul thought it was a great idea. So here he is, and they're fighting a battle against the Philistines. They are one of those traditional biblical enemies. And here we are in this story. The army of the Israelites are lined up on one edge of a valley, and the Philistines are lined up on the other edge. And the armies are facing each other and grunting and groaning and shaking their swords and things like this. And out from the Philistine line walks a 10-foot tall man named Goliath. And they weren't even sure he really was a man. They had this idea that the giants who were still around in those days were descended from the angels and the first humans. So this guy, he might not even really be human. He's a big guy. What is this monster? And he comes out and he's wearing a big helmet, and he's wearing 150 pounds of armor, and he's got a spear with a point on the end that weighs 15 pounds on its own, and he's got his own guy who carries his shield for him. This is a formidable foe. And he comes out every day and says, Israelites, send me your strongest, bravest warrior, and we'll fight, and I will conquer him, and I'll conquer all of you, and I'll feed you to the animals. And the Israelites were quaking in their boots. So every day the same thing happened. Goliath came out and he taunted them, and he said, you're nothing, and I'll defeat you all myself. Now there was a little boy, about 10 or 12 years old, named David. And he had some older brothers who were fighting in the army. And he was in charge of taking care of the sheep back at home, but he would sneak away from the sheep every day and bring some supplies to his brothers and to the other soldiers. And one of these days he came to the front lines, and he heard Goliath make this boastful proclamation, and he said to some of the soldiers, so what do you get if you kill Goliath? You know, is the king going to give you a lot of land and, you know, marry you off to his daughter? And what gets to happen? And the soldiers said, you know, keep your mouth shut. Why are you saying all these things? And of course, King Saul hears about this little guy, David, who's making some boastful statements about, I'll go out there and I'll defeat him. And Saul says to David, "You're just a child. What are you thinking?" And David said, "Well, I take care of the sheep, so sometimes a bear comes along and I'll chase him off with some rocks, or if he tries to attack me, I'll beat him up and I'll kill him. So, I'm pretty tough." And Saul said, "Well, okay, let me give you some armor at least." So Saul gives David, a nice suit of armor, but of course it's for a man. So there's David, 10, 12 years old, trying to walk in the big person's armor, and it's just a nightmare. So David says this isn't going to work. He takes off the armor, he picks up 5 stones and puts them in his sack, and he says, "This and my sling are all that I need." Okay, so David walks out and confronts Goliath, and Goliath laughs at him and says, "You come out here with sticks against me, and I've got a sword, and I've got a spear, and I'm 10 feet tall. What are you thinking?" And David says to him, "You come with your sword and your spear and your javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This very day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head." So when the Philistine Goliath drew nearer to David, David quickly ran down to meet him. He put his hand in his bag and he drew out a stone and he slung it, and we know how the story goes. Right in the forehead. And down goes Goliath, and David runs over and cuts off his head, and he is the champion. And the Philistine army, they don't know what to do, so they run for the hills, and the Israelites chase them all the way to Edom, and they've conquered their territory. It's a favorite story. You probably knew it before I even started to tell. We love an underdog story, don't we? We do. It's so true. This cherished story of David and Goliath, it's been a favorite from the time of the rabbinic sages all the way to today's vacation Bible schools materials, and that theme of the underdog being virtuous, it just resonates with us. So I thought today I'd tell you one of my own David and Goliath stories. I think we all do have a story of David and Goliath, of overcoming some odds or stepping up in a frightening situation. So here's mine. This is where the baseball comes in. When I was in middle school, I played Little League, like many, and I loved it. It was great. My dad was an assistant coach on the team, and so that was fun. We'd do it together. And one day, we were playing against, I think it was the Oakland Athletics, the Little League version, and and they had a pitcher. And we referred to him as Big Bad Mo. His name was just Mo, but to us, he was Big Bad Mo. I think he had stayed back a year or two, and we were, 11, 12, and this kid, he looked like he should be driving. He had like the beginning of a beard. He was very big. To us, he seemed 10 feet tall, and he was the pitcher. And his strategy was to throw pitches to hit you, because then you'd be so scared that you wouldn't even try to swing, right? If you're going up against Mo, you just, cower in the corner and he'll strike you out. And so the day we played Mo, somehow I suddenly got a stomachache. I don't know. And I said, "Dad, I have a stomachache. I think I need to go home." And he said a few things, but the thing I remember was he told me about Babe Ruth. He told me about how Babe Ruth was not only the best, had the most home runs, but he also had the most strikeouts. So it was not so much that he was the best baseball player of all time, but that he always went in there and he faced the pitcher and he swung the bat and he tried to hit, right? So I thought, okay. All right, I will do this. I will go. And I don't know if it was because I was the only girl, but he didn't try to hit me with the ball. Thank goodness. So I went up there and I was able to actually get a hit off of Mo. And then the boys, it was just me as a girl, everybody else was boys, they saw me hit against Mo, and of course, the rest of the team knew that they could do it too, right? So there we were all together as a team, and I'm pretty sure we won that game. Because once they saw that somebody could stand up and do it and actually make some progress, everybody else decided to give it a try too, to try to be brave. So, you probably also have a story of facing your Goliath, and maybe many stories. It might have been a Norma Ray kind of situation where the man was trying to get you down and you decided to stand up for yourself. Who knows? There are so many ways in which we need to draw on bravery. It's hard to be brave in this world. It's hard, especially in the face of the news, right? It's hard sometimes to get up and go out our door when we don't necessarily feel safe, when we know that the world can be frightening. So for some people, just getting up and going out of the door can be a brave act. And then there are others who take the bravery a step further, who stand up for what they believe in. And there are lots of ways to do this. It's not just filibustering for 15 hours. It's brave to be able to stand up and live authentically. For some people, they feel that they have to behave a certain way or look a certain way or live a certain way to be accepted. And for some people, that's hard to reconcile with who they feel they are on the inside. So to live bravely as ourselves, that's quite a statement. And David, when he fought Goliath, that important line where he says to Goliath, "You come with sword and spear, but I come armed with the strength of the Lord." That is a powerful and true statement. God, our Father, and those who have nurtured us and taught us to be brave, the thing they teach us is not about carrying the sword and doing violence. It's about knowing that we have things within us that are greater than we could imagine. That it's not about the sword and the spear, but it's about having faith in oneself and in God to be there with us in the fight. And David, who had lived out in the fields with the sheep, imagine how many times he had come up against challenging situations, whether it was a bear or drought or whatever it was. He had to know that he could trust in God to take care of those sheep and take care of him. So he had seen it happen. He knew that God was faithful. He knew that whatever he tried to do, God would have his back. And he did. And this story of his defeat of Goliath helped to propel him forward to become the king of Israel and to become the greatest king of Israel of that time. It was because he had faith in himself and because he had faith that God would be there for him, and it was something that God had taught him by being there for him. Bravery is to face the foe with integrity. It's not about being fearless. There are things to fear in the world. Fear is a very real thing. It's not about being fearless, but about being able to face that fear and step up anyway, and look the fear in the face, and be brave. There are lots of stories of braveness around. I was looking at stories of those who were involved in the Orlando incident this past week, and I heard about Louis Bourbano, who was in the club and who survived the gunfire, but on his way out saw so many injured. that he risked his own life to rescue those who were gravely injured, and not thinking of his own safety, put others before himself in a terrifying situation. And that is some bravery. I hope that as you go forth this week, you'll think about those situations in your life that call for bravery. We all have them. Whether it's about standing up for something you believe in, or supporting somebody who doesn't have the support they need in their life. Whether it's about speaking out on an issue, taking action, contacting your legislator. Whatever it is. God calls us to do more than just say a prayer. Prayer is important. But God calls us to live bravely and boldly. So I hope that you will be inspired this week to look the things that you fear in the face, to step into that batter's box, and to swing away. Amen.